career and how it have transitioned from circulation to lung physiology and renal physiology. So a summary of his work is happened in 4 books, and one of them is the one that is more relevant, that have been just donated to our department. But there is other books in piezoelectrics and other technique that was published by Domingo. And I just, to be in a safe side, put more than 65 articles, but some previous resume, it showed that having actually more than 70 journal papers. They are divided into a large majority into the block hemodynamic area, circulation, and into the lung study from gas exchange in the lung, in human lung, and animals. But also have some interesting paper in renal physiology, and I wanted to start by mentioning what is the summary of his work, initial work, when he was in Paris. And in general, I can say that he was able to understand and use data that was available at that time to formulate principal laws underlying blood circulation and hemodynamics, which ended in the book. And I think that is have a summary of all his work in that period, initial period of 20 years. There is an archive. France have an archive that contain all his work. You can go there and see, but it's difficult to get them as PDF. And I just get few examples, downloaded it. It would require work because you have to take like pictures and get it out of the system. But I wanted to show that some of this work that was published in this initial period, all of them are in French, but you can see the original material from those archives. And these are, for example, example of papers that I was able to get. Most of them published in a journal called La Presse Médicale. I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly this. There's another paper with Garaudel, and just as examples, and with Pierre Eglé as well. So his main work was on understanding the blood pressure, mean blood pressure or average blood pressure, and develop equipment to measure it, and also to develop mathematical framework to model it. And as we mentioned, this is just a picture of the book that we were able to bring here to FIU for a few weeks. You can see that it's full of, as Dr. Bibel mentioned, Professor Bibel mentioned, there's 600 equations in this book. And I just wanted to show one of the pages that we were able to take a picture of the book where it was here. Hopefully we will have soon an English version of this book. But Dr. Gorman also created devices as a good biomedical engineer, and have 2 well-recognized that we were able to find documentation of these devices. One was invented with Baquez and Gley. It's called a chemometer, and this is taken from their papers. The design, it was a device to measure the average or mean blood pressure, and they use it to study validated studying blood pressure from femoral and of animals. And actually, you can go to the archive of the patent, and you can actually take a piece of that device that was invented from those catalogs. This is actual. I don't know if it's a picture or a drawing, but very well designed. There was another device that were created, as has been mentioned several times. He considered Langevin, Paul Langevin, and Andrew Langevin, a good friend, and Paul is like a father to him. And for people from the physicists in the discipline of physics, they will, most of all, will recognize Langevin for contribution to statistic and dynamic, and also because of his introduction of the piezoelectric devices and electromagnetism. And because of that, and the friendship with Domingo, they invented a new device to measure blood pressure. And actually, this is the design that appeared in the paper. And we were even able to find the actual picture of the device that was available in several scientific centers in Europe and America. So I don't know if we will be able to find some of this in a museum or some institution, but at least we have a picture of the actual device. So in general, in that period, before moving to out of France, we would say that other contribution, in addition to this that have been just presented, was an introduction of the dynamic mean pressure, the discovery of the L hypertension Majonin solitary disease or related phenomenon, a formula to estimate interrenal hemodynamic, and the discovery of the nephrentin substance in the kidney cortex. Those are finding and discovery associated to Domingo's Gomez work. Then, as have been mentioned, they moved to NYU in that initial period. It came as a refugee and entered the School of Medicine here at NYU. And this is quote taken from his resume. It work focused on the development of mathematical framework to study the circulation of the kidney and other organs. And there is a lot of publication that were created in that period, that were published in that period. He was, as mentioned, he was a very good friend of Albert Einstein, and it was because of his relationship with Langevin from the very beginning that introduced back when they were in France to Domingo to Albert Einstein, and Albert Einstein actually was very excited to see a lot of theoretical work in the area of biology, and they became friends and discussed their work. And in that period, Dr. Gomez was in the laboratory of Cournal and Richa. So they that happened just a few years after they received the Nobel Prize for their contribution to physiological concept and method and technique to the study of respiratory and cardiocirculatory diseases. When you go to the paper of the Nobel Prize, a post-Nobel Prize paper about their laboratory that I can share with you if you're interested, you can see that at least in that paper, 41 trainees from this laboratory, out of which that list, Domingo was one of these 41 trainees. And I have been also looking at the position after this. They left the lab, and 24 of these 41 trainees became directors and chairs of the department and chief of division of College of Medicine. So that can tell the level of research and dedication that was in that laboratory. But as I've been mentioned, Domingo was called by Cuban government to start the Institute of Cardiology in Cuba. And it was initially an idea by PRIO, but that idea was later consolidated because of letters directly from Albert Einstein to the Cuban president Fulgencio Batista. In that letter, which is, we have just a very, very bad, not in good condition copy, but you can read in that part that Albert Einstein asked the president to give an opportunity to work an application of all theoretical work that Domingo developed into the clinical practice, and that take us back to that initial conversation of the resistance that exists in that period to have theoretical and mathematical work, to use theoretical and mathematical work in translational research and in clinical studies. I believe because of this later and other factors, Cuba decided to move forward with the creation of the National Heart Institute in Havana. And according to the resume, Dr. Gomez's resume, he lists in the period of 1953 to 1959 that he was the director of the center. At that time, there was just a concept. There was no building, and there was just we're creating the concept and creating the infrastructure for that. But as a result, in 1960, the Clinic Antonetti, which is currently that National Heart Institute, was inauguration of that building, and it was part of that project that brought Domingo Gomez to Cuba. In practical terms, there was some disagreement in that period, that initial period, that put this project somehow on standby. But in 1966, the same building, this is a more current picture, but the same building became the National Heart Institute. And the founding director that was recognized, Alberto Hernandez Cañero, actually published a paper describing the history of cardiology from 1937 to 2007, and it's like a 20 pages document. And I just wanted to mention that in that official document from the Cuban Society of Cardiology in Cuba, which is this acronym here, SCC, from the archive, it was clear the direct involvement of Domingo in different aspects, from the honor that he received in the November 13th of 1941, in which he gave a lecture to the society, to the creation of the Cuban Commission to create the National Heart Institute, or the Cuban Institute of Cardiology, in 1952, and then the division. What the reason for the division between these two institutions when another institution was created, which is the Institute of Cardiovascular and Thoracic Surgery, that create division and forces that confrontation of forces that may have result in the delay of completing that project of the National Heart Institute. But as was mentioned, he returned to the USA, and he got two positions at the time. One as assistant professor of medicine at the College of Physicians in NYU, and the other as a surgeon of Columbia University. So I want just to quickly revisit some of the work done in that period, but I can tell that most of this work focus on studies of blood circulation and investigation of physiology of respiratory phenomena. So wanted to bring one of the topic that have been already extensively discussed in this event, but I wanted to bring here because of the social impact that it has this day with the COVID-19, and our society have received an education, an extra education on what is mechanical ventilation and what is the impact and how can change completely the life of a person, the quality of life of a person that is being infected with the disease. But the creating a mechanical ventilator is just not a pump that push air into your lung with a certain level of oxygen. You have to understand how lung work, and you have to understand certain physiological parameters that will allow you to create manipulation that are in the safe range for the patient. And in order to understand that, we have to look at what is the main parameters that we have, clinical parameter that we have, which is lung or pulmonary compliance. I have a graph here of what you would see if you have measure of pressure, tidal pressure from a sensor in one of the system, when you have a breathing pattern. So you have, of course, the first, you increase pressure because you're inhaling air, and then for some time you can hold it temporarily, voluntarily, or you can have a manipulation that allow you to hold, or you set equipment to hold it for some time, and that allows the definition of two parameters, and these two parameters are very useful to calculate, to estimate this compliance. And then you return to the established or imposed pressure, which is the PEEP, at some point. So based on these parameters, people can define clinical, more clinical related parameters. That is, for example, the static compliance or the dynamic compliance that is related to the total tidal volume that you put into the lung, typically between 500 to 600 cc, and these two parameters that you can get from the sensor that you have in the system, and that is crucial to understand diseases and to understand what is happening with the lung. Like, for example, if you have a certain conditions that departure from the normal curve that you may obtain with this from these parameters. So how to understand this compliance and what is happening physically there, because this is a sac that can contain, that will absorb the air, and where this gas exchange happen. So that is what this work of Domingo have the major impact. So here is a picture of these, the airways of different diameters, ending at the end of this airway. You have these sacs that contain the alveoli, and this is what expand or contract depending on the amount of pressure or volume that you impose into the machine. So you need to understand how much volume, how much pressure you can have in that space, because if you go beyond those parameters, you can create inflammation, and you can produce some further damage. Also, you need to understand how the gas, the oxygen CO2 exchange happen in those alveoli, to try to predict what's going to happen when you have certain condition like a watery or a tissue with inflammation in general. So that is where I think Domingo's initial work had this tremendous impact. And this is a picture in that paper, one of these papers that discussed the effect of what was going to happen. It's actually called the post-Nobel challenge, that paper. And after the Cornara and Rachel received the Nobel Prize, what was the next step? And that's when in this work they refers to all these ideas that Dr. Gomez proposed, and that just changed the field dramatically later. But I just wanted to mention superficially some of these results. If you go to any of his papers, you will see that it's difficult to find a paper that doesn't have more than 10 equations. But I just bring the most remarkable thing just to keep this in the layman term. So, and again, this is something that happened because of the collaboration with Dr. Bibo. And this is what the problem was about. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It was just the challenge how to go from a two-dimensional space to a three-dimensional space. So because what you have histological image is in a two-dimensional space, you want to reconstruct figures that typically fears kind of geometries that are in a three-dimensional space. And that, as was mentioned, resulted in completely apart estimation of the number of alveoli in the lungs, from billions to 100,000. So that is with this initial work that came in published in the Journal of Applied Physiology, in which they use was a famous bead, but I use a pure mathematical construct to estimate how many of these geometrical component was in a lung from a limited set of two-dimensional histological image. This is what you would get from the data, and from that is where you have to estimate that number. So that resulted after a long mathematical demonstration and perhaps 100 pages of work in a famous formula by Domingo of that number, based on few parameters like the density of alveoli and a parameter that they need to correct experimentally, which is called the shape factor beta, and also the count profile in the section, which is this parameter n. So this formula that is very simple resulted from long days of work to demonstrate this, and that was what Dr. Bieber referred to, an experimental demonstration after the paper was published, an experimental demonstration, during the demonstration of the paper, within the demonstration of this paper, an experiment was performed with beads and with actual lung tissue, that the formula was correct. Very simple formula, a lot of work behind this, very large impact in the society. With that formula, they were able to study that branching, lung branching of the airway, and study and finding a theoretical prediction and experimental result of the diameters of this airway, and also arteries and capillaries. And so the relationship between the branching generation and the diameter of this airway and vessels. So this is was a theoretical prediction, but it was demonstrated from experimental work. Then it came to applying this. This theoretical framework at this point is just anatomy. It's just finding this morphometric element and counting them from histology and develop a theory of how much capacity the lung may have. But they didn't address the problem of how the volume, the tidal volume distributed in all this airway, which is necessary to understand how much air with oxygen arrived to the alveoli. So that is what this following study came in 1962 in the Procedure of the National Academy of Science, in which Domingo obtained a distribution of that tidal volume in the whole system, in the whole lung. And again, this is a very simple mathematical equation with few parameters that have interpretation, but the theoretical work that is behind is tremendous. And if you are familiar with the publication policies of the PNIS, you will understand that it's very hard to come with a pure theoretical work and to publish a pure theoretical work in that journal. So that is how much relevant was this topic to the society that it went published in this high impact factor journal. So that theoretical framework allows them to apply it to study the actual volume in the human lungs and the distribution of this tidal volume in the human lungs. And this is another paper that was published in the journal Applied Physiology 2 years later after the theoretical framework was published. And also that work served to study different conditions. And in this paper, they studied distribution of this specific tidal volume in children with bronchial asthma. In this other paper with Caldwell, that we, by the way, we have been in contact with Dr. Caldwell and provided some of the material, pictures and some of the material. In this other study, they apply the theoretical framework to all the pulmonary diseases. But as mentioned, that solved the problem of only the problem of physical compliance and physical expansion of the volume, and what is the total capacity that of air that can get in, and how to relate this volume to pressure, and finding range that are actually in the same range for for normal humans, and also to study how specific disease changes that capacity the lung to expand and receive this volume of air. But that doesn't tell us how much oxygen of the that is available in the air can be absorbed and how much CO2 can be exchanged. And that is when these two persons separated. So Dr. Domingo went back to Europe, and Domingo stayed here in the United States, but they still continue collaborating. And some of these results were published after Dr. Domingo left the country. And one of the most prominent results of that period was this simple equation for oxygen saturation in the lung. So as you can see, this again, repeated again, this look very simple, and you may think, well, you know, how just that equation could be something that takes time and effort to develop, and you have to go to the actual publication, get inside that publication, see the level of detail, the level of treatment from the Freiherr integral equation to partial differential equation. It's a lot of work to get into that point. But the beauty of this is that simple equation work, and that simple equation have been validated. And as you can see here, that oxygen saturation not only depend on the oxygen partial pressure in the volume, in the lung, but also depend on pH and temperature, because it's in that part in the lung that some of the temperature change happen, and body is able to release some of the temperature through the air. So it's a very phenomenological and very practical to study how the lung respond to a specific disorder, and how some of these physiological parameters could become clinically relevant when you are using a mechanical ventilator or even a sensor of tidal pressure. It came to the final question in this topic that Domingo was able to answer is, when you know the oxygen saturation in this alveoli, how this is translated into the hemoglobin, how its hemoglobin is, the oxygen is absorbed by the oxyhemoglobin. And that is also another publication that this part is a little bit more complicated, so I didn't find a simple equation that I can summarize, but it's actually a very beautiful study there on that exchange with the hemoglobin. So in general, the work after this focus on studying the laws of distribution of gas flow through the lung, throughout the lung, and of the blood flow through the organs. And there were a few other studies, and this is another remarkable result, is the application of all these mathematical construct to study the continuous distribution of a specific blood flow through the organ to different organs in the human body. As an example, here there is a study also published in the journal Applied Physiology, which, as mentioned, is very difficult to publish in this journal, of a functional evaluation of blood volume and distribution of blood flow in the kidney of man. So I wanted to finish this summary saying that I just took one particular topic that Domingo worked on and expand a little bit, but you can do that with many other of the topic that that he worked on. I just wanted to illustrate with this example how consistent he was from defining a problem from the pure anatomical structure to go to the functional and then apply to a specific practical problem. That was allowed because of his background in mathematics and also because of his background as a college of medicine student, as a doctor. So this is a summary of all his position when from the CV that was submitted to NYU. At some point, he maybe put it there, the finals positions. But you can see that starting from the assistant in cardiology at the PT hospital, chief of the laboratory and clinical research hospital, investigator at the laboratory of physiology, College of France, adjunct chief of the clinic. So it's a very rich career that have impact not only the clinical work in cardiovascular and respiratory research, but application of cardiovascular and respiratory research to clinical work, but also in the society in general. So with that, I would be happy to take some questions.
Hi, Dr. Riera, this is Ranu calling. What a rich life, and how fantastic the contributions have been from the fundamental knowledge to now. I think really what I would like to hear from you is perhaps a commentary or some comments to the students now of how, you may start with one thing and you may think that there is a challenge here, and how passion can can help you surpass all kinds of obstacles if you have a passion. That is very, very clear from here, and this dedication to it. So I just wanted to have some comments from you about that.
Yes, so that let me use that question to also mention to some sort of parallelism between myself and Dr. Gomez. I don't know if this was a serendipity for me, but I also did my PhD in La PT. So we were in the same hospital doing work, similar work. At that time, I was working on magnetoencephalographic data, so it was non-vascular, but I'm now working in functional fMRI and vascular physiology. So we're in the PT. I am from a little town in Cuba. So Guatemala is a countryside, which is also happened to be the same situation that Domingo has when he was in his childhood. And also my family was very poor. So I had to find certain opportunities to grow in that period, because I was first generation in college, and that is something that is somehow similar to the life of Domingo. So all these elements, I identify myself with Domingo's life and career, and I ended also being an immigrant in different places. Have to immigrate first to Japan, finish first my studies in Paris, and immigrate to Japan, and then also being here in the United States, another element that connect to Domingo. So it's hard, and I know that many students from Latin America, try to find, to get their dreams, achieve their dream here, moving to the United States, and it's very hard for them. And we have certain tools that help. We have the Latin American scholarship that actually one of my students, Carlos Riera, got it for 2 years. And we are also very lucky that we have the Wallace Carter Foundation and the McNair and the Weldon for minority and underrepresented population. But still, there is a phenomenon that I have been observing here since I arrived at FIU, and is culturally tied, bound to what in Latin America in general, but Cuban, specifically Cuban, understand for success. And what people link to success is being in the College of Medicine, being a medical doctor, and being a lawyer. And when you look at the effort that many of these families that immigrated from Cuba here, they focus on, they make an extraordinary effort working overnight and over long hours to guarantee that their kids go to and receive a bachelor degree. And still there is no complete understanding that this is just that this have just become a step to continuous education that is difficult for a student when graduate with a bachelor degree to get in the high end of payroll, and they have to continue educating themselves to receive a master or a PhD. But it's difficult to educate family in that respect. So we wanted to create more scholarship, and that's what this effort have been, to try to open a Domingo Gomez Gimeranez scholarship to help that transition from a bachelor degree to a master degree, and helping some of the best to go through that difficult path. Was that the question related to Dr. John? Because maybe went a little bit on the...
No, it's good. It's good. I'm glad that you brought up your own story and the connection to it, because many of our students are immigrant students and come from many different backgrounds, and families have very different expectations. And sometimes, as you mentioned, you were the first in your family, you're a first generation student. And if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Hutchison is also. And so I know that sometimes it's also very difficult to have the conversation with your own family members to explain, especially if you have a passion for things like math or something more abstract, and you're trying to convey it to them, and it becomes really difficult. And you question yourself, you question everything else. And so I'm glad that you brought it up, and you brought up how your own pathway has brought you where it has, and then the family connections. And I think many of us are immigrants. I'm not a first generation immigrant, but I am an immigrant also. And so there is a different kinds of connectivity that that we bring to ourselves here in the United States as we pursue our dreams. And so I think, so thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I think with this has been a fantastic and very exciting. I mean, I'm very happy with the whole, the event. I've been a whole day, and I think it's going to start producing fruit soon. And I'm sure that Dr. Hutchinson, myself, and Danny will keep working hard to bring this to a reality, this scholarship. I wanted to use this opportunity to request Dr. John a little space in the department where we can put the book and perhaps some of these articles and a space like to show Domingo's work and keep it there somehow in a permanent way. Maybe when we move to the new building. Just wanted you to consider that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think like we have a showcase bookcase here, we should think about a showcase bookcase of Dr. Domingo Gonzalez's book, and then as you are talking about it, faculty books that are there would be a great way to have a showcase for that.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So I wanted to thank first Daniel. If Sida want to say, she may be very tired right now, but if she wanted to mention something, we start working on the paperwork to create the scholarship. I sent you, Daniel, some emails and some documents that I wanted just to make sure that you received them. And we will have a meeting on Monday with Livia Souza, in which we will get all instruction on how to proceed with this. At this moment, what we want is to have a space that where we put all this material, the videos, the papers and things like that, and we make a link to an account that people can donate. We will make a call for our community to be engaged and donate whatever they can, even if they just send $1. But we need to have that particular account linked to this material on this website that Domingo will have. And we will have a meeting on Monday in which we will discuss a little bit this detail. Dr. John sent me some document that I forward you guys for your consideration. And if you have something to say, Sida or Danny now.
I forgot to tell you that the father had been Madame Curie's assistant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a very important. He adored her. He adored her. I think he cried when she died. He was very close to her. A father and mother type of thing, obviously, not a romantic thing. I also would like to start the ball of collecting money for a scholarship, and I'd like to send you a check for $2,000.
Thank you very much.
You're also in my will, as you know, but you're going to have to wait because I'm only 89. So
hopefully you stay there for a very long time and you can help us make this reality.
And I'm collecting things, other publications from France of my father's. I will send them back with Dene.
Okay.
And whatever I can find that is that I know will interest you. Now, I also have 2 suits of my father's. Would the university be interested?
So Ms. Gomez says, if Dr. Riera, if I could take this moment to think about a little bit outside the box.
Yes.
We do have a museum. We have two museums that belong to the university. And perhaps this is a conversation that we can talk with our foundation to see if these would be things to put up in the museum or under the museum's collections.
Yes.
And in the same way, even the articles that are there and that if they were digitized, there is our library carries a permanent record of digital, what they call the digital commons, which becomes public. And that might be a way for us to reach out way beyond our own department. And so to talk with our Dean of Libraries and see how we might be able to put this kind of information into the FIU system and reach out even beyond our own department. So so I think it will be great to have a if, you know, we are very, very appreciative. I can't say how appreciative we are for your gifts. And perhaps if we make a summary of Dr. Riera, and when you're looking at it, and then we can talk to FIU as a collective and say, here are all the different things that we would like you to consider to somehow be encapsulated at FIU for a permanent recognition of this great man.
And with that, thank you all of you for being part of this. This is just the starting point, and we'll be fully engaged from now and putting and growing this more and more every day. So have a wonderful weekend.